Welcome to today's webinar, Teaching Students Money Management, presented by Dr. Manny Rosa on April 4th, 2019. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Manny Rosa.
All right, thank you very much. If you are watching this on record, you want to write down my email, mrosa@keiseruniversity.edu. This way, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me as you're watching the presentation. Once again, I'm the electrifying Dr. Manny Rosa, and it's my pleasure to talk to you about money management. I do not have a degree in business or finance. My PhD is in education. However, somehow I feel like I have, through circumstances and through self-discovery, have really been able to learn money management and teach it to various groups. I attributed a lot of it to just not having a lot of money growing up and just having to work with what I had. And then still, even though I've advanced my degrees, I think I still, in some sense, I think I'll always be that poor boy from the inner city. So I think that has driven me. I watch a lot of Susie Orman, and I listen to Dave Ramsey, and I read magazines. So this is the experience and knowledge I bring to you. Everyone has different philosophies, so I encourage you to do that. These are just my philosophies that have been influenced by those two. And what if you need any proof, I can proudly say that my credit score is 849 out of 850. So, and I have no credit card debt. So there's more testimonials as to why I am going to be leading you through money management. A lot of this webinar is going to be, as all the webinars I deliver, a lot of it for you to do some self-reflection, because when you're teaching money management, you need to realize what your strengths are and what your areas of opportunities are, as well as providing some specific tips for students and specific tips for parents as well, because it does take everyone involved, as with most of our topics, to make sure we're educating our students. So we're going to talk about the components of a budget, tips on how to balance a budget, and then I'm going to share some resources for creating lesson plans on money management. Since you'll be watching it on record, you won't be able to chime in, but you'll be able to click on those links and get some strategies through that avenue. So this also coincidentally is Financial Literacy Month. So I just thought I would throw that in there. And what does financial literacy mean? It's one's understanding and knowledge of financial concepts. And more specifically, it refers to knowledge and skills related to money management. It includes the ability to balance a checkbook, manage a credit card, prepare a budget, take out a loan, and buy insurance. So ideally, these are something you probably are familiar with. And due to no reason of your own, maybe some impulse, things could be going well in the money management department, or things may not be going well in the money management department. And for those of you watching, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. So I told you these were my two influences, Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman. Dave Ramsey has a podcast. If you have XM satellites on 111, channel 121 from about 3 to 5. And then Susie Orman used to have a weekly show on Saturday evenings at 9 o'clock. I used to joke, well, actually it was true, she would keep me from going out Saturday nights because I would want to watch her. So Dave Ramsey said, I believe that through knowledge and discipline, financial peace is possible for all of us. And then Susie Orman said, no one's ever achieved financial fitness with a January resolution that's abandoned by February. So it's important that you yourself, and then you tell your students that, this is a lifelong learning process, managing your budget, reducing your expenses and increasing your income is a lifelong journey. So it's not something where if you blew the budget this week, then, well, you just blew a whole year. It's something that you continue to work on. And I think it's important that children understand that and learn that and learn from your mistakes if you are not balancing the budget correctly, so that they can avoid some of the pitfalls maybe that you as a teacher or as a parent are experiencing. And it does take, as if you're for those of you directly in the classroom, it does take some self-disclosure when talking about money, because it's when researching the topic, it's shown that in the United States, compared to other countries, we have less direct education on financial literacy. So some of you can pass on this information too if you have an official course, and then hopefully most of you could just infuse into your curriculum, whether you're teaching high school, and also if you're having any parent-teacher workshops or outreach. So if you are a Generation Y, Generation X or baby boomer, you probably heard about the American dream, living in this house with a white picket fence, being married, children running the playground. So that was something that we grew up when I was growing up, something that was focused on and was supposed to be what you were to aspire to. But now, given today's climate, given today's diversity, different dynamics, the so-called American dream just may not be out of reach. And that doesn't mean that you have not made it in America. It's just there is not a big push now. You don't have to own a home if you don't want to own a home. You don't have to be married if you don't want to be married or have children. So the American dream has somewhat altered. And some of it is also just out of the scope of reality, given the money that's being spent on student loans and luxuries. For some, the money is just not even there to even think about this so-called American dream that's been framed by society. So we're going to do a little self-assessment here. I like to have the audience start thinking about how they are in their topics. And this week we're talking about money management. So there's a series of items. This does require you to engage in some math. So if you have a calculator, you can pause if you're watching on demand and take it out now, or you can use your iPhone to calculate. So we're going to follow the directions and we're going to see how many points. Ideally, you would have 75 points. So we'll see how many points and you can share or not, that we have. So add 5 points if you have a budget. So that could be, you know how much is coming in at the end of the month, and you know how much is coming out, and you're intentional about it. Add 5 points if you know how much money you have in all your accounts. And if you don't know retirement exactly, that's fine. Just if you know your checking and savings account. Add 5 points if you bought a store brand rather than a name brand this week. And by store brand, I mean Kohl's, Target, not store brand, Ralph Lauren. I guess if you went to Sawgrass, then maybe there could be a slight exception. But so it doesn't have to be this week. It could just be overall for the month. Add 5 points if you have a savings account. Add 5 points if you added money to your savings account. Add 5 points if you pay your own car insurance. And if you have a bundled car insurance that you're getting a discount on, then you could add the 5 points for that. Add 5 points if you clip coupons or coupons. Add 20 points if you put money in a retirement account. And for those of you employed or have pensions, hopefully you're matching whatever the school is giving you. Add 20 points if you have an emergency fund. Some say 3 to 6 months. Dave Ramsey says 3 to 6 months. Susie Orman says 8-month emergency fund. And then you're going to deduct points. Deduct 5 points if your account's ever been in the negative and you paid additional fees. So if all went well in the first edition, you should have 75 points. So deduct 5 points if your account has ever been in the negative and you paid additional fees. Deduct 5 points if you bought something this week without comparison shopping. I always mock my friend who goes to 7-Eleven and buys Red Bulls, when if he just went to BJ's and bought an entire 12-pack of Red Bulls, he would be saving a lot more money. Deduct 5 points if you bought something from a convenience store, and that's a follow-up with that. And then deduct 10 points if you pay interest on a credit card. So if you would like to self-disclose, you can include that in the chat about how many points you have added or what your total is at the end. And if you're watching this on demand recording, then you can pause and send an email with your points and where you have lost some points. And this is good exercise even to start conversation with high school students. You could adjust these. They most likely don't have a retirement account, but you can say, if your parent has a retirement account, because that can be a good conversation starter for the home. And then 20 points if they have an emergency fund, that can also be something they can involve their parents in, asking if they have an emergency fund, just to start getting students into that frame of mind and start getting this lingo and language into their heads. So now that you know your score, look throughout this presentation to see what are some areas of opportunity or where you may need some more information so that we can get to the point where you have all 75 points and doing well on your money management and budgeting. So, and when explaining an income and a budget to children, students, simply put, you can just tell them it's income. There's two ways we're going to approach this. If it's adults, high school students, you can talk about income and expenses. And income, if you need to provide a definition, money earned or contributed to your household from either personal finances or business. And then expenses, money that you spend. This includes anything you purchase. This includes both planned and unexpected expenses. And believe it or not, there are, and in your classrooms, there are students that have lemonade stands, that may have wash cars, that may go to the grocery store and be baggage work. So there will be some students that are getting money from business, are starting their own business. And then personal finance could be money that they get from their chores or allowance. So you could break it up into that when trying to explain this to your students. So why do some budgets fail? And when talking to students, this is something you should have so that they're not discouraged if things aren't going as planned. But it could be just a negative attitude. Some students may have picked up if their parents aren't managing money correctly, or have a negative attitude, or maybe there's one parent that's a better budgeter than the other. Then they're going to come into the classroom and they're gonna have that stigma and that experience. So talking to them about why budgets fail, if they have a negative attitude, if they don't have motivation, and then maybe they have unrealistic expectations. The kids want to be, they want to drive BMWs, they want the latest iPad, the latest iPhone, and they can't, they just can't afford it. So having this conversation with the students in your classroom gives them that it's okay to fail, but that they have to work on improvement immediately after. So here's a typical layout of what some expenses are. Once again, when speaking to children, they may not be cognizant of this, but it would be up to you to make it their reality, whether it be through words or whether it be through pictures. But letting them get the sense that everything around them costs money. So the rent, or if it's a mortgage, but where you sleep, someone is paying for that physical structure. How you got to school today, there's um, maybe a car payment, there's the maintenance, there's the gas, and even asking them, well, how much do you think gas costs? Or how much gas does it take to go back and forth from your school? Insurance, whether it's medical insurance, life insurance, auto insurance, home insurance, um, food, and students can definitely relate to food. When they bring their lunch, if they bring their lunch to school, or if they're going to the cafeteria, having a conversation, hey, how much did that cost? Because it may not have cost them any money that day directly, but it did cost probably their parent. Utilities, if a student leaves your classroom and they leave the light on, or they go to the bathroom and the water is running, or if they see security, just once again bringing it to their attention, all this costs money. The clothing that they have, ask them if they're a student, if their parents went to college, because then that brings them, and if their parents got it paid for. They may not know the answer, but once again, a good conversation starter. And that's where student loans will start factoring in. And for those that are in high school, who may be transitioning to a 2-year school or a 4-year school, then you want to talk about student loans and what that's going to look like. And then income taxes, which is something we all have to pay. So starting to explain to them what that looks like and what happens with the money. And then there's miscellaneous, entertainment, going to the movies, paying for that Netflix subscription. Childcare, if they're younger students and they go home and their parents have a babysitter, they will need to realize that babysitter is getting paid and not doing it for free. Also, it could be a way for them to make money is being babysitters. When they talk about spring break, in Broward County, we just had spring break, and my niece and nephew are in the 8th grade and 9th grade, and I can't believe that at that age they're thinking, oh, we didn't go away for spring break, or what should we do for spring break? So putting those holidays in sports bars, hopefully they're not going to bars. And then family and friends, every birthday party they go to, that's going to be an expense. Every anniversary they celebrate, that's going to be an expense. If there's 20 kids in a classroom and everyone goes to the birthday parties and they bring a $20 present, that's an expense. So not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but just trying to make them aware of the value of money and what each dollar costs. So that's miscellaneous and essential. Maybe you would use those terms for high school students, but for the younger students, and even for the high school students, and probably even for yourself, you may want to talk about it in terms of wants versus needs. So, and I love this graphic because they're both apples, but one is is trying to represent the Apple company, which is relatively more expensive, and some would say a luxury. And then as I'm here on my Mac Pro and looking at my Apple iPhone and my Apple Watch is ringing. And then what is need? And there's the regular Apple, food. So putting that depiction of wants versus needs and starting at a very young age to have that conversation in your classrooms. So what do needs include and this is very similar to the list we went, but just a little bit more specific, clothing, and pointing out t-shirts, socks, medical care, if the student is sick and went to the doctor, pointing out, oh, how much did that cost? Nutritious food, shelter, and that would be the rent or mortgage, transportation to and from the school, the utilities, and then saving for an emergency fund or retirement, encouraging them to have that conversation. What are some wants? And ask your students, what they think is needed, what they think they want. And it's all relative. One family may have one person in the one child and one parent, and so they don't need a small car. They don't need a big car. But there may be a family of 5 who they're not splurging, but they just need that big car to get around. So reminding students that it's all relative. But electronics is possibly the big want that students experience, and it's not just to have a phone, but they need to have the latest phone with the best camera every year that it comes out. Even though there's nothing wrong if they had 480 pixels and now they only have 240 from last year. Having that picture. Well, what is the difference? How is your life going to be impacted by that? Jewelry, clothing. Students want designer, name brand. I remember asking my nephew, he wanted to get glasses, and I advised him to go to Target, and he didn't want to go to Target because it wasn't name brand. And then when I told him, well, he wanted to go to Lens Crafters, and when I told him, well, the company that owns Target also earns Lens Crafters, it still didn't hit him. He still wanted to go to Lens Crafters. So just trying to have those conversations with students. Magazines and comic books, movies, television, toys, video games, and now computers. And then, of course, candy for the younger kids. They may think they need candy, or they may get their allowance and spend it all on candy, but trying to have that conversation of what better ways they can spend that money. So here's a suggested activity for students in your classroom to start the conversation about wants versus needs. So I would advise you that before the activity, you ask your class to name wants, and then make a list of all their wants. And you may want to even ask them, and then have them ask for needs, and then put that list there. Have them define wants and needs as well. And some ways you can get them to start thinking about that is asking them, what's the first thing you do in the morning? How do you get home from school? What do you do when you feel hungry? What would happen if you never slept? So they can start thinking about, what's needed and what they want. Use a whiteboard or a poster board, or if your students are nonverbal, you can use pictures. Whatever mechanism you think would help will work with your students. Ask for questions. Why do we need food? Where does food come from? Focusing on the needs and the oxygen and the air, and you probably can throw in some global warming if you want to go that route. And then talk about, at the end of the day, what is something that you cannot live without? And students may say TV. There was a study that I think it was with teenagers, whether they would want, they can either have their last meal or they can have like their last, if they knew they were going to die and they can have their last meal or like send out a couple of more emails, what they would do. And a majority of them preferred to just send the emails rather than have a last meal. So for those that are visual, here's another graph that you can use to depict wants versus needs. You can leave it blank. You can have students fill in the colors. You can have students guess the percentages. But roughly, this is a typical household, the calculations of spending. Now, of course, after this money management workshop, debt repayment will be go to zero, because we will all be on the path to living a debt-free life, and so will your students. So that graph, of course, could be altered. So students need to know the terminology and be exposed to it early on. So I put high school, but this is something that can be, start to be taught even to your middle school students. But words like budget, expenses, checking account, and savings, and what the difference is, interest earned on a savings and, not in a checking. There are some checking accounts that do have savings, do have some interest, and talking about penalties, total amount, ATM, cash only. credit card, cashier. These are numerous terms, and some of them in 10, 20 years may even be obsolete at the rate as our society is going. But these are terms that you can start talking about with your students, so they can have an idea of what's out there and how it associates with money. So the next slides have resources that are available to you that can help teach your students or your children how to manage money. Number one is dollars and cents. So if you just put that in a little net search, that talks about how to count coins, spend money, and make change. So that is good for middle school students or those who are having more time understanding the concept, more of a challenge understanding the concept of money. Next Dollar Up is an online tool. It's like a game where you can buy and sell things, and it mimics a real life setting. Money Instructor has free worksheets with good examples, pictures of both American and Canadian coins. Even though you want to always use, if possible, real money, so students can look and feel and touch the money and feel what that's like. But understandable if you have a large class and you don't have enough to give out. Americasaves.org, that tells you, talks a little bit about savings and other resources. And for high school students, I think this is very good. It's True Cost to Own Calculator. So if you put that in the internet, it tells you what things really cost. So when you're buying a car, it'll calculate, well, this is how much it'll cost. This is how much it'll depreciate. This is how much your gas will cost. This is how much your maintenance will cost. So it tells you, just because you see the sticker or you see the surface, that doesn't mean that's exactly what you're getting. Another organization that helps, and these organizations also specifically focus on students with disabilities, the Jumpstart Coalition. It's a coalition of organizations that share an interest in advancing financial literacy among students. Jumpstart's online clearinghouse has a very comprehensive collection of financial education resources, including booklets, pamphlets on specific topics, activities, online games, and teacher lesson plans. And what stood out for me with this website was that there is a tool that asks you a series of questions about the future. What house do you want to live in? How many days a week do you want to work? What industry are you looking at working at? And then it tells you how much money you need to make per year to afford that lifestyle. So I definitely think it's an excellent resource and an eye-opener for our students. But of course, you want to use it in a motivational manner and not let students be discouraged that they're not going to live on Fisher Island in Miami Beach with their $7.5 million mansion, that they're going to have to work hard and work extra hard to be able to afford that, but not impossible. Then there's Money Smart, and this is created by the FDIC. It's a comprehensive financial education curriculum that teaches the basics of handling money and finances. And it talks about some of the things we talked about: how to budget, save money, how to avoid making wrong decisions that may result in years of financial pain. And the best part is the curriculum is available free. So there's a toll-free number you can call, or you can just copy and paste that. And once again, or just go Google and it'll pop up. A third resource is My Money, and more specifically, mymoney.gov. It's the U.S. government's website dedicated to financial education. And it talks about budgeting, credit building, financial planning, understanding privacy issues, saving and investing. So depending on the grade you teach or the level of understanding of your students, this will depend on what topic you're trying. You can get off of this website. And they also have, there's the website address and also a toll-free number. And then there's practical money skills for life. That's something else, practicalmoneyskills.com. And it has various resources, personal finance articles, lesson plans, games, etc. And we're actually, I'm going to try and click on that link so we can see that live. There are also board games that you can have in your classroom that can start students thinking about money. And you're probably having flashbacks because you probably have played one or two of these. So there's Monopoly, the Game of Life, Payday, Budget Town, and Budget City, and those are created by the Attainment Company. So those are something you want to have in your classrooms if you get an allowance, or maybe something if the budget calls for it, or you just want to invest in it to start the conversations about money. And also, and when talking to parents, having them suggesting those as presents for their kids as well. So if you're talking to parents, or if you have a child of your own, or you want to do this in the classroom, here are some tips to start, especially for the younger students. You want to start early when it comes to money and having the children think about money. And it should be intentional. When you're at the grocery store, point out the name brand and the generic brand, point out the price difference, ask if they think there's a difference in the quality. Flat out say, oh, we cannot get this today because mom, I cannot afford it. Or, we couldn't get the supply for the class today. But having every financial decision verbalized so they can start realizing the impact of money. Practice coin identification, and that's something you want to do early on, or if students are having challenges with understanding the concept of money, then doing that, you're making sure repetition, playing games and doing lots of role plays. For those students that have anxiety or don't like to be in public places, maybe mimicking a store in your classroom, or creating the atmosphere of a store to calm down the students. Recognize the limitations. If students are just not ready to be in the frame of mind that they can spend money or touch the money or make the change, that's okay. It's all about focusing on the individual student, and then let kids make transactions. If you want to practice that in the classroom, say something costs money, and then have them give you money, whether it's real or fake. Fake money in the classroom, real money, and I encourage you to use cash. Because even as adults, it's very easy to swipe a credit card and because you don't physically see it, you don't realize the impact that's having. And that's one of this generation. One of the fears is that they will be more prone to spending because they don't have the physical money to touch. And then, of course, using social stories in your classroom to reduce that anxiety. Talking about how fun it is to go to the store and how great it is to save money and to use the money for other things, how to handle frustration. So using social stories with students as well. So there's this. So there's practicemoneyskills.com. I was going to copy the link, but I'm not going to. But definitely, you should do the Google. It has 10 lesson plans that cater to students with disabilities, and take step by step of. They have the PowerPoints, the lesson, and even some assessments. So I would highly encourage you to look at this valuable resource and download all the materials, and then figure out what's appropriate for your level and for your classroom. And I'm sure if it's all materials that you can tweak for your students. So practicemoneyskills.com. And going back more specifically to teaching money and counting skills, um, coin recognition and using real coins is the ideal situation. So maybe having 2 pennies, having a bunch of coins, and telling the students, okay, give me 2 pennies, give me 2 nickels, give me 2 dimes, and constantly doing that repetition. Or having cups with one's, nickel, dime, quarter, and then having a whole bunch of change, and having students putting the pennies in one cup, the nickels in one, or matching the coin with the quarter, having a dime and then writing down 10 cents and having students do that. And if you can do that with Post-it notes if you don't have the money, or of course you can do use fake money, but ideally you would use real money. They can also practice counting, and you could use your number lines and hundreds charts, and having the students repeatedly say it out loud, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 10, 20, 30, 40. So having that repetition. And then making coin templates, and you create those by cutting out coins, pasting them on index cards, write the value on the card, front for low functioning children, on the back as a self-correcting activity. Give students nickels, dimes, quarters, have them count them out. And then especially for quarters, which are higher values, that would be a better technique. And you only need to make one card with 4 quarters, and the numbers 25, 50, 70, or 100. They can count multiple quarters in rows. So if this is a specific skill that you think your students need or to be familiar with at this time, then I suggest you follow that specifically. Now, here are some personal tips. As I told you, I handed you, we talked about good websites that you can go to for the students in your classroom. And so for you to think about you and reflecting back on your assessment, here are some things you could do, and these are my opinions, to teach your children and to follow yourself. So, getting the point across that the income must be equal to or more than the expenses. So you should create a chart that has all the money you're bringing in after taxes, and then everything that's coming out. Haircuts, gas, food, groceries, going to the restaurant, and then hopefully at the end of the day, you're not in the red. Do not charge credit cards unless you can pay the balance in full, because you don't want to pay interest. Do not impulse shop. Ask yourself, what else can I do with this money? Buy in bulk, and you can ask the kids in your classroom if they're part of BJ's or Costco. Also, if they're on Amazon, if they do subscribe and save, where you get a delivery every month of 5 or more items, and if you do 5 or more items, that's 15% off. Clip coupons, take that Sunday newspaper or online, and it's a fun activity with the kids. You can have them in your classroom. You can have them exchange coupons, so they can start that, learning that. Delayed gratification, and this is going to be extremely hard, and it goes back to the need versus the wants. But if students need that, if they think they need that latest version, we'll convince them that they can wait till the older version goes on sale. 8-month emergency fund, even though our employment numbers are doing well, you never know what's going to happen. So to have that emergency fund just give you some peace of mind. Ask your students if they have cable. You will need cable for the next 6 weeks starting April 14th for Game of Thrones, so you definitely need HBO. But then after that, there could be something that you can get rid of and get something maybe cheaper, like Netflix, which is $19, Hulu. They're all around the $20 range, Netflix, Hulu Live. Save now for retirement. And this is something you can, an activity you can do with the students in your classroom, having them create envelopes. And in the envelopes, they put money for things they need, things they want, and then and make an envelope for a charity and teach the kids in your class the importance of charity, and then money for the future. So you can use an envelope system or a jar system, to help students with understand that. Do not take any extra money for loans unless needed. Make sure if you tell your high school students and they're going to college, I took out money to go to Cancun on spring break 2 years in a row. And I have regretted that decision because I paid for that Cancun trip for about 2 years, no, for about 10 years, because I did pay off my student loans 3 years ago. But still, it was not a wise decision. Transfer to a school that is cost effective. Our students want the big names and the name brands. And if they can get scholarships, that's fine. But I know here in South Florida, the Miami-Dade College, Broward College, local community colleges getting 2-year degrees. And they're very reputable institutions, so you can save 2 years and then transfer if you like, if that's what the student wants to do, or they may just be transferring out or transitioning to just straight to the workforce and just having them understand the money. Pursue a major that aligns with your future cost of living, and I shared that website with you, the Jumpstart, where students can do that. Pay your monthly bills on time and avoid late charges. Review your credit report. So this is more for the older students, for yourself. Review your credit report and make sure that there's nothing, everything on there is yours. You can attain your credit score once a year. You can get a free credit score at annualcreditreport.com. If you have student loans, pay off your high interest student loans first. So this is where Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman differ. Dave Ramsey will tell you to just pay off the smallest amount so that psychologically, it's one less thing you have to pay. And then Susie Orman would tell you to organize everything by the interest and pay that off, the highest interest first. I lean more towards agreeing with her, but at the end of the day, it's whatever you decide. Consolidate your student loans for those of you, and if you can be honest with your students, and say that you have student loans, and that's part of going to college, and just having those conversations about money. Use legitimate financial institutions. I have my money. I have a couple of checking accounts, but one of them is in a credit union because they tend to have higher interest rates for the savings accounts. Open up a Roth IRA. This is more advanced, but I wanted you to benefit from this. Open a Roth IRA, and then if your employee, if the school system is adding to your pension and they're going to match you, then you want to make sure that you do that as well. And then creating a personal budget. You want to identify and write down your financial goals. And for students, it could just be they want to buy a present for their parents for Mother's Day or a birthday present. So making it small scale, but making it a big deal for them. You want to track your expenses. Everything you spend, school supplies, going out to the movies. If the students spend lunch money, if they download iTunes and they get songs from iTunes, you want to have the students writing all that down. Assigning priorities. What this goes back to the need versus wants. Develop a timeline for the month. Identify and write down the amount of money you're spending. Find spending that is not necessary. And to a younger student, this probably everything is necessary. So you'll have to have that conversation. And then review and revise the budget often. And going back to the negative attitude, why budgets fail, not being all defeated, but just trying to do a better job in the next month. Here are some great apps that you can use to help manage budgets, and students love apps. A majority of them do, so this may be a bigger selling point. I personally use the Mint budgeting app. That's how I have all of my accounts on this one app. It reminds me when things are due. It tells me if I'm overspending in a different category. So I think it's fantastic. It also tells you I have my retirement funds in there. So it's an excellent app, and the rest of them are well too. But I highly recommend the first one, the Mint budgeting app, and it's free. And finally, opportunity, any opportunity you can to teach kids about money, please take that advantage because you may be the only one talking about money. It may mean that you have to share some of your personal experiences, and hopefully you're comfortable doing so. But if you can just infuse this into the curriculum at least once a week and be intentional about it, it could be as easy as, oh, someone left the light on. Well, this is going to cost this much money. Or someone left the machine running. Or I didn't bring my lunch today, so I had to go out and buy lunch. This is costing me this. But looking at each individual student, what their comfort level is, and giving them the resources to support them. At the very least, having them understand the how to count coins and how to use the money and pay for it properly and be comfortable in that environment where you're handing over money. And even if the students are not social, just realizing that that's just a part of life. But that all happens with conversation and with building trust with the students. And that's all I have. Once again, if you're watching this on recording, you can email me, mrosa@keiseruniversity.edu, and I would be more than happy to respond individually and go over the lesson plans. There's those 10 lesson plans. I can go over that with you and give you more specific deliver them. But anyone have any questions for me? All right, so Dr. Miller, I think we're finished.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rosa. Please, to our participants, we would appreciate if you could take a few moments to complete the survey. Here is a link that you can complete, and as soon as you do that, we'll be able to produce a certificate for you. So you will see that right at the end of the survey.